Here is the fact that makes everything else in this story require explanation. As a freshman at the University of Iowa, Connie Hawkins was ineligible, under NCAA rules of the time, to participate in varsity-level athletics. He could not have fixed a game because he was not permitted to play in one. The NBA banned him for 7 years anyway. Before this video ends, you will learn about the $200, who gave it to him, who paid it back, and why none of that mattered to the NBA. You will learn what Julius Erving said about who actually invented the moves that Erving became famous for. You will learn what Willis Reed said about Hawkins, before Hawkins had played a single NBA game. You will learn what the NBA paid when the lawsuit proved the ban was wrong. And you will learn what he averaged in his first NBA season, at 27 years old, after everything. The number will make you angry. Here is the fact that makes everything else in this story require explanation. In 1961, the college basketball point-shaving scandal, masterminded by Jack Molinas, produced 37 arrests from 22 colleges. Connie Hawkins' name surfaced in an interview with an individual connected to the scandal. Hawkins was questioned by New York City Police Department detectives without being allowed to seek legal counsel. He was expelled from the University of Iowa. He was blackballed from the NBA. He was banned formally in 1966. He lost 7 years of professional basketball at the highest level, 7 years during which he was, by the unanimous assessment of every player who competed against him in the leagues that would have him, the best player on any floor he stepped onto. Here is the fact that the NBA knew when it banned him and chose not to address directly for 8 years. As a freshman at the University of Iowa, Connie Hawkins was ineligible, under the NCAA rules of the time, to participate in varsity-level athletics. He could not have fixed a game because he was not permitted to play in one. The point-shaving conspiracy that Molinas had organized required players to control the outcomes of games they were playing in. Hawkins was not playing in any games. He was a freshman. Freshmen did not play varsity. He could not have done what they said he did. The physical structure of the situation made it impossible. Not unlikely, not unproven, impossible. The NBA knew this. The NBA banned him anyway, for 7 years. The loan was $200. His brother repaid it before the scandal broke. Molinas had given it to him as he left for Iowa City, money for school expenses, the kind of informal assistance that a former player from the same New York basketball world might extend to a teenager heading to college for the first time. $200, repaid by his brother. And he could not have fixed any games in any case because he was a freshman and freshmen did not play. The NBA paid him $1.3 million to settle the lawsuit he filed. The settlement acknowledged what the ban had been. Wrong. He was 27 years old when he finally arrived in the NBA. The league that had banned him for something he could not have done gave him $1.3 million and assigned his rights to the Phoenix Suns, and called it resolved. His 7 prime years were not in the settlement. They were gone. The $1.3 million was the price the NBA put on the most unjust ban in the history of the sport. This documentary is about the 7 years, what was in them, what they cost, and what remained when they were over. Cornelius Lance Hawkins was born on July 17, 1942, in Brooklyn, New York. The specific Brooklyn he grew up in was Bedford-Stuyvesant, the neighborhood that in the 1940s and 1950s was one of the most densely populated communities in the country, a neighborhood where the outdoor basketball courts were the primary competitive arena for the generation of players who would define the sport's transition from its regional roots to its national identity. He attended Boys High School in Brooklyn, the school that had produced a generation of athletes and that was, in the late 1950s, one of the most basketball-celebrated public high schools in the city. Hawkins led Boys High to 2 New York City championships. He was named First Team Parade All-American. He was named Mr. Basketball USA. He was, by the assessment of every coach and scout and player who watched him, the finest high school basketball player in the country. The playground legend preceded the high school recognition and outlasted both. The Rucker tournament in Harlem, the outdoor competition that has served, across the decades, as the Supreme Court of New York City basketball, the venue where professional players and playground legends compete on equal terms and are evaluated by audiences who have no institutional interest in the outcome, had seen Hawkins, and the Rucker had its verdict before any coach or scout had formalized theirs. He could do things above the rim that the sport had not seen from a player of his size and positional profile. The hands, enormous, capable of palming the ball with one hand in ways that allowed him to control it in midair in directions that defenders could not anticipate, were the physical foundation of a style that would eventually be described as the predecessor to everything that Julius Erving and Michael Jordan made famous. He was the original. The moves that Erving would be credited with inventing had been performed in Brooklyn playgrounds and in Rucker tournament games by Connie Hawkins before Erving had arrived at the University of Massachusetts. He was ready for Iowa. He was ready for the NBA. He was ready for the professional level in a way that the best players in the country are ready when they are 18 years old and have been the best player on every floor they have ever stood on. Then Jack Molinas loaned him $200. Jack Molinas was a former NBA player, a forward who had been banned from the league in 1954 for betting on his own team's games and who had subsequently organized the most sophisticated college basketball gambling conspiracy in American history. He was from the same New York basketball world that had produced Connie Hawkins. He was a lawyer. He was, in the specific ecology of New York basketball, a figure who existed at the edges of the legitimate sport and who had relationships with players across multiple generations. Before Hawkins left for Iowa City in 1960, Molinas gave him $200. This was not unusual in the context of the relationships that existed in that world, a former player extending informal assistance to a teenager heading to college. The money was not given in exchange for anything. Hawkins said it was for school expenses. His brother Fred repaid it within the year, before the scandal broke. $200, repaid. In 1961, when the Molinas gambling conspiracy was exposed and the arrests began, Hawkins' name surfaced in an interview with one of the conspirators. The New York City Police Department brought him in for questioning. They questioned him without allowing him to seek legal counsel, a practice that was, in 1961, not unusual for the people the NYPD brought in for questioning, and that was, by any subsequent legal analysis, problematic as the foundation for the conclusions it produced. The detectives pressured him into something resembling a confession, an account that was, by Hawkins' consistent subsequent statement, not a confession to wrongdoing but a frightened teenager's attempt to give investigators something that would end the interrogation. He had not been arrested. He had not been charged. He had not admitted to fixing any games. He was expelled from the University of Iowa. No other college in the NCAA or the NAIA would offer him a scholarship. The contamination of the association, regardless of the evidence for what the association actually involved, was sufficient to close the institutional doors. The NBA did not draft him in 1964. The NBA did not draft him in 1965. In 1966, the NBA formally banned him. He was 23 years old. He had accepted $200 from someone he knew, the money had been repaid, and he was physically incapable of having fixed any games because he had been a freshman, and freshmen did not play varsity. The NBA banned him anyway. The worst thing he could be accused of is introducing some guy, said Jerry Colangelo, who would later become the Suns' executive and who knew the full history of the case. When you're on the playgrounds, there are all kinds of guys hanging out. That could happen so easily. The 7 years between Hawkins' expulsion from Iowa and his arrival in the NBA were not spent in obscurity. They were spent in every league and every context that would have him, performing at a level that made the players who competed against him, and who eventually made it into the NBA, consistently, unanimously clear about what they were watching. In 1961 to 62, he played for the Pittsburgh Wrens of the American Basketball League, the short-lived circuit that existed briefly as a competitor to the NBA. He led the league in scoring. He was named the league's most valuable player. He was 19 years old. When the ABL folded, he joined the Harlem Globetrotters, the touring entertainment team that was, in the mid-1960s, the most globally recognized basketball brand in the world, but that was not a competitive professional league in the sense that provided context for evaluation against NBA-caliber competition. He spent 4 years with the Globetrotters, dazzling crowds in venues where the game was theatre rather than sport, maintaining his skills against opposition that was not designed to maximize their competitive development. He and a team of former ABL players dominated the summer tournaments in New York City that summer against teams of current NBA players. Willis Reed, the New York Knicks center, who would eventually win 2 NBA championships and be named Finals MVP, watched Hawkins perform in these games and arrived at a conclusion that he stated publicly and directly. "We all know he'd be a superstar in the NBA. All the guys know it." The players who competed against him at the highest available level knew what was present. The institution that had banned him for what it acknowledged was not a crime continued to maintain the ban. In 1967, the American Basketball Association launched, a new league competing with the NBA for talent and fans, built around the three-point line and a more open style of play. The ABA had no rule against players who had been associated with the Molinas scandal. Hawkins was eligible. He joined the Pittsburgh Pipers in the ABA's inaugural season. He led them to the ABA championship. He was named the ABA's most valuable player. He had won the MVP of 2 different professional leagues before the NBA allowed him to enter the building. In 1966, the same year the NBA formally banned him, Connie Hawkins filed a $6 million antitrust lawsuit against the league. The lawsuit argued what the facts supported, that the ban had been imposed without evidence of wrongdoing, that Hawkins had been denied due process, that the NBA's blackballing had deprived him of the professional opportunities his talent warranted. The lawsuit was, in the specific language of antitrust law, a challenge to the NBA's use of its monopoly power to exclude a player from competition on the basis of a guilt by association that no formal legal process had established. The lawsuit made its way through the federal court system over 3 years. The NBA, as the legal process proceeded and the evidence that would have been required to defend the ban became more apparent to the people who needed to defend it, realized what the documents would show. The documents would show that Hawkins had been banned for something that the NBA's own investigation had not established he had done, that he had been questioned without counsel, that as a freshman, he had been physically ineligible to participate in the games he was alleged to have fixed, that the $200 had been repaid, that no formal charges had been filed, that no arrest had occurred, that the ban rested on a foundation that the courtroom was going to dismantle, piece by piece. In June of 1969, the NBA settled. They paid Hawkins $1.3 million, not the $6 million he had sought, but a settlement large enough to constitute an acknowledgement that the league's position was indefensible. They assigned his contractual rights to the expansion Phoenix Suns, who won them in a coin flip over the Seattle Supersonics. The settlement was not an apology. The NBA did not say it had been wrong. It paid $1.3 million and moved on. He was 27 years old. He had been the best player on every floor he had played on for 7 years. He had won the MVP of 2 professional leagues that were not the NBA. Willis Reed had said everyone knew he would be a superstar. The NBA paid $1.3 million for the 7 years they had taken. He arrived in Phoenix for the 1969-70 season. He was 27 years old. He had already had knee surgery. The 7 years in exile had not been kind to his body in the way that 7 years in NBA facilities would have been. The league that had banned him for something he could not have done finally let him play. The 1969-70 Phoenix Suns were an expansion franchise, 2 years old, building an identity, needing something to organize around. What the coin flip had given them was, by any assessment of what Connie Hawkins had produced in every context that had been available to him, something that expansion franchises do not typically receive. He averaged 24.6 points, 10.4 rebounds, and 4.8 assists per game in his first NBA season. He was 27 years old. He had not played NBA-level competition since before the ban. He had undergone knee surgery. He was playing for a franchise that had won less than a third of its games the previous year. He was named to the All-NBA First Team. In the final game of his rookie season, he scored 44 points, grabbed 20 rebounds, and contributed 8 assists, 5 blocks, and 5 steals in a single game. His rookie year. The Suns finished third in the Western Conference. They met the Los Angeles Lakers in the playoffs, the Lakers of Wilt Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor, and Jerry West, 3 Hall of Famers playing together on a team that was the consensus best in the conference. The series went 7 games. Hawkins averaged 25 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists per game against Wilt Chamberlain. Against Wilt Chamberlain, at 27 years old, in his first NBA season, after 7 years of exile, he averaged 25 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists. Willis Reed had said everyone knew he would be a superstar. The first NBA season produced the evidence that Reed had been correct. The evidence arrived 7 years after it should have arrived. He made the All-Star game in each of the next 4 seasons, 1970, 1971, 1972, and 1973. He played for the Suns until 1973, then finished his career with the Los Angeles Lakers and the Atlanta Hawks. He retired in 1976. His number 42 was retired by the Phoenix Suns. He was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 1992. He was the most unjustly banned player in the history of professional basketball. He was also, when finally allowed to play, everything that the 7 years of exile had prevented the world from seeing. Julius Erving is credited with inventing the aesthetic of the above-the-rim game, the hang time, the mid-air creativity, the ability to alter the trajectory and release point of a shot while suspended, the specific style that made watching professional basketball in the 1970s and 1980s feel like watching something that had not existed in the sport before he arrived. Erving himself did not fully accept this credit. He pointed to Connie Hawkins. He said that what he had done was absorb and extend what Hawkins had shown him, that the moves that became identified as Erving's signature had been performed first by Hawkins in Brooklyn playgrounds and Rucker tournament games and ABL arenas and ABA gymnasiums, in contexts that the national audience never fully witnessed because the national audience was watching the NBA and the NBA had banned Hawkins. The hands. This is the specific physical detail that everyone who watched Hawkins play returns to. He could palm the basketball, hold it, fully controlled, in a single hand, in ways that allowed him to adjust its position and trajectory in mid-air with a precision that defenders could not anticipate. The ball was, in his hand, an extension of his arm, in a way that it was not for other players. Michael Jordan, in his own later assessment of the history of the moves he was celebrated for, placed Hawkins in the same lineage. The behind-the-head extensions, the adjustments in flight, the creativity above the rim that made Jordan's offensive game look like something that had never been seen before. Jordan acknowledged the debt to a player most of his audience had not seen, because most of Jordan's audience had been watching the NBA in the years when Hawkins was not allowed to play in it. He invented the vocabulary. The sport attributed the vocabulary to the people who came after him, because the people who came after him had the audience that he was denied. The ban did not just cost Hawkins his prime years, it cost the sport the ability to correctly attribute its own history. Let us do the accounting that the $1.3 million settlement never completed. Connie Hawkins averaged 24.6 points, 10.4 rebounds, and 4.8 assists per game in his first NBA season, at 27 years old, after knee surgery, and 7 years of playing in leagues below the NBA level. He made the All-NBA First Team. He averaged 25 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists against Wilt Chamberlain in the playoffs. This was his first NBA season, at 27. The players who enter the NBA at 20 and play their first 7 years at that level, who develop in NBA facilities, who compete against NBA defenders, whose bodies are maintained by NBA medical and training staffs, typically produce their peak performance somewhere in the range of 25 to 29 years old. Hawkins produced all NBA first-team numbers in his first season at 27, after 7 years of inferior competition and 1 knee surgery. The projection for what those 7 years would have contained, if the NBA had not banned him, if the $200 and the repaid loan and the freshman ineligibility had produced the correct institutional response of no ban, rather than the actual institutional response of a 7-year ban, is not a projection that requires a significant leap. He was the best player in every league he played in before the NBA. He was one of the best players in the NBA in his first season there. Willis Reed said everyone knew he would be a superstar. The first season proved it. The Hall of Fame confirmed it in 1992. What the 7 prime years would have produced, the championships, the all-star selections, the statistical record, the historical position, is genuinely unknowable. What is knowable is that the player who averaged 24.6 in his first NBA season at 27 would have averaged something at 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26, and that something would have been significant. The league paid $1.3 million. The 7 years were not in the settlement. They could not be put in the settlement. They were gone. $200, repaid by his brother before the scandal broke. Could not have fixed any games because he was a freshman and freshmen did not play varsity. Was questioned without a lawyer. Was expelled without charges. Was banned without evidence. Was banned for 7 years. The institution that did this to him was the National Basketball Association, the institution that had been organized since its founding around the principle that the best basketball players in the world should be allowed to compete in it. The institution that banned Connie Hawkins was banning a player who was, by the consensus of everyone who competed against him, among the best basketball players in the world, and doing so on the basis of an association that its own subsequent settlement acknowledged was insufficient to justify the ban. The ban was wrong. The NBA knew the ban was wrong when it settled. The $1.3 million was the price it paid for having been wrong for 7 years. He arrived in Phoenix at 27. He averaged 24.6 points, 10.4 rebounds, and 4.8 assists. He led the Suns to their first playoff appearance. He fought Wilt Chamberlain to 7 games. He made 4 All-Star teams. He had his number retired. He went to the Hall of Fame. He died on October 6, 2017. He was 75 years old. Julius Erving said he had learned from Hawkins what could be done above the rim. Michael Jordan acknowledged the lineage. The game that the sport celebrates as the highest expression of individual offensive brilliance, the above-the-rim creativity, the hands, the adjustments in flight, traces to Connie Hawkins, who performed it first in the 7 years when the NBA would not let him in the building. $200, repaid by his brother, a freshman who could not have played in any game. 7 years, $1.3 million. The math of what the NBA owed him and what it paid can be performed by anyone. The result is the same every time. The payment was insufficient. The 7 years were gone. The Hawk had soared in exile for 7 years, while the institution that should have celebrated him kept the door closed. He went in anyway when they finally opened it. He averaged 24 points in his first season, at 27. After everything,